watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussions, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
And welcome back to Reason and Theology, everyone. Your host, Michael, on a Wednesday morning here. I wanted to talk about three distinct things. And so instead of doing three separate videos, I'm just going to do them all together in one show. And haven't done a live show here, at least a live solo show here in a little while. Feels like it's been a while at least. Okay, so the first thing that we were going to address, in fact, let me just kind of lay out what we're going to go over. We're going to briefly go over reports about Cupich and some events related to the Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest. Then I wanted to talk about the case of Padre Pio kissing Lefebvre's ring. Some people have brought this up to me and have asked me to comment on it. And then I wanted to lastly comment on some of the reactions and comments that I've received from my recent video engaging Taylor Marshall. And so that's kind of what we're looking at today. So again, the first one here is about Cardinal Cupich. And there's right now rumors that he is going to shut down Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest in his diocese. I have been hesitant to discuss this so far. I've been hearing about these rumors. I've been hesitant to discuss it because right now it's hearsay. And I think it's best to wait until there's something official and more substantial to engage. But at this point, it's becoming so reported, so widely disseminated that, okay, I think it's necessary to offer some comments on. And so a patron also asked me to do so. And at first I said, I think we need to wait until something is actually official. But then continuing to see more reports since then, I've said, okay, I need to comment on it. First of all, I love Institute of Christ the King. I've had some great experiences with them. I had the opportunity to go to Chicago, to St. John Cantius, and experience the beautiful Mozart Mass that they had there. Some other Latin Masses, just the non-Mozart ones, and then also a Novus Ordo that they did that was very, very reverent and respectful. And so I got to see a pretty wide range of what they do. And I thought that they were awesome. I also had the opportunity to speak and interview a couple Institute of Christ the King priests during that trip. And I really appreciated them. And I got to visit St. Stanislaus in Milwaukee, I believe is where it was. Really enjoyed the liturgy there. So I think the Institute of Christ the King, from what I've seen, is great. And so if this is true, if the reports are true, and again, that's an if right now, then I think that's unfortunate because Cupich is in a position to use Institute of Christ the King to reach many, many people with wonderful and great liturgies. He has that privileged opportunity because not all bishops have that. He has them right there in his backyard. Privileged opportunity to reach more young people and grow his diocese. So if the reports are true, this would be incredibly unfortunate for everyone all around, but including him as just an administrator of his diocese. It's shooting yourself in the face from what it seems, because they're really, really good at, again, celebrating the liturgy very reverently, and that attracts people. And that's also what God deserves. So it would be very unfortunate if this is true. But again, so far it's hearsay. It could very well be accurate. I'm not saying that these are all just baseless and unfounded rumors. However, I do have concerns about people widely reporting this right now when there isn't anything objectively verifiable to substantiate these rumors. I have some serious concerns there, and that's why I've just hesitated to even comment on it. But since we've gotten to the point that so many people are now reporting this, okay, it becomes time to address it. But I think it's incredibly irresponsible for people to have reported this already at the level that they have without actually having something substantial, with only going based on rumors. I saw the other day somebody share something on social media, and it was a meme of Cardinal Cupich, and it said something along the lines of, I just destroyed the Institute of Christ the King, and I'm blah 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 blah. And so it's a meme saying that Cardinal Cupich has already done this. And I just asked the person in the comment section, do you have a source for this? Because if so, I'd like to verify it, and I'd like to then discuss it on the show. Because if that's true, I think that's unfortunate. Um, and I think that that's the wrong move for Cupich here. So I asked him for a source, and he gave me another source that itself doesn't have a source. It did not cite anything. It cited, well, it did. It cited hearsay. It did not cite anything objective. So I said, well, what you sent me to also doesn't have an original source that's, substantial, that's really verifiable. And he said, I don't make the news, I just share it. And I said, but this isn't news. This is hearsay that you're sharing. Don't you see the point? And so if you're wrong, I told him, if you're wrong, what you've just done is you've slandered the name of a cardinal. Not that his name is very held in high esteem these days, but still, every person is entitled to, accurate reports about themselves. So you could have just slandered him and also shared misinformation, which is incredibly irresponsible and perhaps even sinful. So I warned the individual of the problems here. I don't know what he did with it. Probably didn't listen. But the point is, I think it's irresponsible to start sharing these things prior to having them verified. Again, that's why I hesitated. But at this point, me not saying anything is now worse than waiting until there's something verifiable. Which is why I'm going to say I don't know what the truth is here. I don't know if this is true with Cardinal Cupich. I think that we need to be reserved in our judgment. If these reports are true, then it's, I think, unfortunate. However, we need to realize right now, to the best of my knowledge, there's nothing that's actually verifiable. It's all hearsay. Let me share something on my screen here, a report. And by the way, thank you for the super chat here, John L. He says, Michael, if you haven't already, could you do a whole video taking a deep dive into the ordinary form? Yeah, I can summarize it right now, though. I mean, I think that the ordinary form substantially is still the Roman Rite. I do think that were some things that were removed from the ordinary form that should not have been removed. So there needs to be some reconciliation between the ordinary form and the extraordinary form. So there needs to be some import of some of those older prayers, some of the scriptures that were taken out of the readings. However, there were some good developments that have come with the ordinary form. But again, there were some corruptions, I think. Not anything substantial, but accidental yet important. So I think that there are some things that need to be restored and reformed, going back to more of the extraordinary forms emphasis. That being said, that's how I would speak of the ordinary form objectively. Feet on the ground, the way it's practiced, I don't recognize it as the Roman Rite. Again, what is officially promulgated, yeah, I see that as the Roman Rite. But what people tend to do in local parishes in some places, I don't recognize that, because it's such a deviation from even the ordinary forms rubrics that it just doesn't look like the same rite any longer. So in practice, it looks like something else. On paper, what's officially promulgated, I would say that there's some continuity there, although we need to have some reform to it. And when I say reform, going back to more of the extraordinary form in some particular cases, but not a complete reset. Hit the reset button. Let's just go back to the extraordinary form. I don't think that that's the solution either, because there were some good developments that came out of the reforms of the liturgy, and that is what the Council Fathers intended. Some of the things went beyond what the Council Fathers intended, and I think that's unfortunate. They were officially promulgated by the Pope, so they're legitimate as far as being promulgated. But I do think that it's unfortunate because the Pope in some cases went beyond what the Council Fathers were asking for. Um, and I think it would have been better if he had just stuck with what the Council Fathers were asking for and just promulgated a liturgy based on that. So maybe if we could go back to what Sacrosanctum Concilium actually asked us for, I think that would be helpful. So if a pope were listening and watching, and you ask me what is on your wish list, my wish list is promulgate what Sacrosanctum Concilium at the Second Vatican Council actually asked for, and some of those things that go beyond that, maybe dial that back. That's my 2 cents there. And also, of course, deal with all of the abuses that are happening right now in the ordinary form. I think that's something that surely should be addressed. Okay, so I wanted to share my screen here and show you the report, one of many, on this issue with Cupich. And I want to show you how it's based on hearsay. Now, it could be true, but it's still based on hearsay. So I think it's premature for places like this to report on them. Why am I mentioning this? Again, because there's so many that have reported on it that now I think we need a teaching moment here where we talk about maybe not reporting things that haven't actually been verified yet. My 2 cents again. All right. Chicago Archdiocese to shut traditionalist churches. This is Catholic culture. Cardinal Blaise Cupich has ordered the priests of Traditionalist Institute of Christ the King to stop celebrating the Tridentine Mass in Chicago by August 1st. Wait, what? He has ordered? To make that claim, you have to be able to verify this. Have they verified this? In a moment, you're going to see no. In a moment, you're going to see their source is unverified, at least what they're telling us. It's hearsay. So to present it this way, that this has actually happened, is irresponsible. It could also be misinformation. It could be true. It could be based on true rumors, right? Some rumors and some hearsay is accurate. Could be true, but I don't have enough information to know it. I suspect it's true. If you were to just ask me, oh, well, what do you think is likely? It might be true. Might not be true. I guess we'll find out soon. If it is true, it's unfortunate. Cardinal Cupich is apparently withdrawing. Okay, wait. So we went from he has ordered to now apparently. What's going on here? Sorry, but I think that's just very irresponsible and misleading. It started out he has done it. Now it's apparently. Okay. So the claims are getting weaker. Cardinal Cupich is apparently withdrawing the faculties of priests of Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest on August 1st so that they will not be authorized to celebrate Mass or administer the sacraments, which again is incredibly unfortunate if it's true. I think that the Institute of Christ the King is doing really good things. And again, anybody who would shut them down, unless there's really, really good reason, and so far I haven't seen good reason, unless there's really, really good reason, they're just shooting themselves in the face. They're not going to grow their diocese. They're not going to reach people. And they're also not going to honor God in the liturgy as much as they should. All right. Neither the Chicago Archdiocese nor ICKSP has issued a public statement about the Cardinal's decision. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? The two groups that we should actually base our news on have not reported on this, which means we probably shouldn't have reported this. But again, it's being reported everywhere, so might as well address the fact that this is a problem to start reporting this kind of stuff, which is, again, also a teaching moment. I want y'all who are watching to start being a little bit more critical in the things that you read. If you had come across that social media post that I told you about, where they made a meme of Cardinal Cupich and said, I just destroyed the Institute of Christ the King, I've removed their faculties, blah, 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 blah. If you had just taken that at face value, you would say that, oh, well, I guess this already happened. But in reality, we don't actually know if that's happened. Maybe it has. Maybe it hasn't. But what if it turns out that this is wrong? What if it turns out that this isn't entirely based on rumors that are unsubstantiated? I'm not saying that's the case, but what if it is? It could be. Well, then all those people will have egg on their face, and they would have then misinformed people and also slandered somebody in the process. And by the way, if it turns out they're right, that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make reporting these things prematurely right. Because you need to report things based on what can actually be verified, not based on hearsay. Okay. Neither the Chicago Archdiocese nor ICKSP has issued a public statement about the Cardinal's decision, but multiple sources have confirmed it. Okay. Here's my question. Who are these multiple sources? It doesn't tell us. Are they out there? I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. Who are these sources? Is this some guy that you spoke to in a private message who's not in a position to speak about it, or who is in a position to speak about it? Some have said, yes, people who are really close to the situation have commented. Who are these people? I need more than that. The situation in Chicago is complicated by the fact that ICKSP owns title to the church, the Shrine of Christ the King Sovereign Priest, where its priests have celebrated the traditional Latin Mass. The site is also provincial headquarters for the Traditionalist group, which has over 120 priests at work around the world dedicated to the use of the traditional liturgy. Only 120 priests? Is that right? I thought that they were larger than that. But hey, I'm thankful for the 120 there. Don't get me wrong, but I thought that they were larger. Cardinal Cupich reportedly made the decision, again, reportedly, based on multiple sources that we can't tell you about, reportedly made the decision to withdraw faculties from ICKSP priests when they declined to celebrate the Novus Ordo liturgy once a month. It could be true, but it just doesn't sound right to me. Maybe that is true. I know that their charism is to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass. I totally understand that. So when it says, however, that they've declined to do the Novus Ordo liturgy once a month, I've seen them do Novus Ordo liturgies frequently. So I'm not sure what they're referring to here. Is it saying that, every one of the priests has to do it or something? I don't know. To me, that is ambiguous, and I need more information there. I don't know if that's true. They're not giving me any sources to back the claim up. Maybe it is true, but I wouldn't know it from what they're telling me. And it just seems to go against what I've seen from them, but maybe it means that he's requiring every one of the priests to do it. And I don't think that every one of the priests does the Novus Ordo. So that's pretty much it. It talks about another bishop, Savannah Bishop, but I wanted to focus on the issue with the Chicago Archdiocese. Again, to reiterate, if the reports are true, and I suppose we'll find out soon, it's very unfortunate. Again, I think that the Cardinal then would be shooting himself in the face, because here you have a great group of priests, from what I've seen, right? I mean, I don't know everything, and I don't know all the priests, and I don't know the entire situation. I'm just going based on what I do know and from my own experiences. So just take that for what it's worth. It sure seems that they have a lot going for them and are doing a lot of good. And is the reason that they won't celebrate the Novus Ordo once a month a good enough reason to shut it down? Assuming that that's even accurate, I'm not so sure that that's a good reason to shut them down. Um, and I certainly would see it if a diocesan priest refused to do the Novus Ordo or something like that. I think that that's more problematic because, um, we're not talking about a group that has been created specifically to continue a particular form of the Roman Rite. We're now just talking about a diocesan priest, but they're, to my knowledge, not diocesan priests. Um, I don't know the situation of every one of the priests there, but again, they have um, a special charism and a special mission to carry out the traditional Latin Mass or the extraordinary form. And I think that's fine as long as we're not too rigid with it and we end up thinking that we have to carry this out because somehow the Novus Ordo is a complete rupture with the Roman Rite or something like that. As long as we're being balanced here, I don't think there's a problem to continue um, that charism. In fact, I think it would be helpful because it will then help balance out some of the abuses that are happening in the ordinary form. It would just help bring us to something, at least long term, I would think. It would help bring the ordinary form, the way it's practiced, feet on the ground. It would help bring it back in the direction that it needs to go. Um, okay, so those are my thoughts there. I'll take questions at the end. I wanted to cover two other topics, but I'm just making sure I didn't miss any super chats because I probably won't see them later if I did. I'm not seeing any, so let's continue with the next point here. Um, so the next one is Padre Pio and Marcel Lefebvre. So somebody was asking me, well, why did Padre Pio kiss Marcel Lefebvre? Doesn't that kiss his ring, I should say? Let me be specific here. Why did Marcel Lefebvre have his ring kissed by Padre Pio? Does this not mean that Padre Pio is approving of everything that he did? Well, I mean, first of all, this happened way before the issues and controversies with Marcel Lefebvre. Um, so that should tell you something. Number two, a saint doesn't always know everything about a person's future. A saint might know what's going to happen to that person, but only if God has revealed it. And God did not reveal everything to Padre Pio. There were some things that he didn't know, and there were some things he did know. There were some times he knew about a person's future. There were other times where he didn't. It's just whatever God reveals to him. We don't know what Padre Pio had been told by God about Lefebvre. We just don't know what God had revealed to him. And of course, there was this occasion where John Paul II meets Padre Pio, and Padre Pio was very respectful to him. There's even a rumor that he told him he was going to be a pope one day. Okay. But didn't John Paul II also have Assisi in 1986 and that whole blunder? Yeah. Well, does that mean that Padre Pio approved of Assisi of 86? No. Just because he was respectful to a future pope doesn't mean that he approved of Assisi of 86 or even knew of it. I don't know if he knew of it. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't think he would have approved of it. So, again, to use this idea of, well, he kissed his ring, he showed him respect, that therefore means he approves of everything by Lefebvre in the future. Okay, well, Padre Pio was also respectful to John Paul II. Are you now saying that we should also approve of Assisi of 86? I mean, isn't that what Lefebvre was opposed to? It's a really bad and inconsistent argument. Let me show the picture, by the way, just for those of y'all who might not believe that this happened. I don't think that it's a problem at all. I would personally, I would have kissed his hand too. I would have kissed his hand even after the issue with the consecrations, even if he's wrong on that issue. Let's just say he's wrong. with the illicit consecrations, I would still kiss his ring. I would still show him respect. You know why? Because he's still a bishop and he deserves that. Not maybe based on personal merits, maybe personal merits factored in and he would deserve it based on that. Maybe, maybe not. He deserves it at the very least because of his office. And so I would have kissed his ring too, even after the illicit consecrations. Again, that doesn't mean that I approve of everything that Marcel Lefebvre has done or believed or taught. But it means that I'm going to honor and respect those who are bishops. Now, this is something that touches on a video that I did a few days ago. I believe I did it for patrons only, however, but you could become a patron and join the channel and get access to it. But I went over briefly where Thomas Aquinas talks about how we are to honor people who are in positions of authority and are members of the clergy, even if they personally haven't merited our honor, even if they personally aren't good people, we should still honor them for the sake of their office and the fact that they resemble Christ in their office, maybe not in their personal in their personal behavior. And here somebody says, well, what office did Lefebvre hold after he was excommunicated? Well, I understand here an office would not necessarily be held. But he still has that indelible mark, right? So for that fact, I would still show some respect for that reason. He still has that indelible mark on his soul. And insofar as he has that, maybe he's not holding an office in the church, but he's still in that role of Christ, at least potentially, right? Maybe he's not celebrating it, although he was. Maybe he wasn't acting on it, although he was. But he still has that indelible mark. So I would have still have shown him respect for that reason, for the fact that he was still validly a bishop, regardless of his situation. Does that mean that I approve of what he was doing? No, that doesn't follow. That doesn't follow. And might I have, if I had the opportunity to challenge him on some things, might I have kissed his ring and then challenged him? Yeah, sure. Insofar as I, as a layman, could do that to somebody who's a bishop anyway. So again, I don't think that just because you show respect to somebody for the sake of their office or for the sake of the indelible mark on their soul, that means that you approve of everything that they do, which is why I've thought that this argument that Padre Pio kissed his ring, therefore that means that he's put approval on Lefebvre, number one, is really scraping the bottom of the barrel. It's kind of second only to the argument that I just dealt with yesterday that basically says, well, the demons allegedly under compulsion have to tell you the truth, and they approved of Lefebvre, which wasn't even accurate. They approve of Lefebvre, therefore we should too. It was one of the worst arguments I've ever seen for the SSPX and for Lefebvre. This might be the second worst. I think it's, again, scraping the bottom of the barrel. Why do people have to resort to such bad arguments in order to promote their cause? Surely there would be better arguments, if they're on the side of truth, that is. So I haven't been troubled by, seeing him kiss his ring. Moreover, there are some things that Padre Pio has done liturgically and accepted liturgically that I don't think the SSPX would have. Now, he didn't necessarily enjoy those things. He didn't necessarily agree with some of the reforms of the church, but he still was obedient to them. And I think that that's kind of the position that we should take. I don't think that there's necessarily good reason for some of the reforms that we had. I think we need to dial some of those back. That being said, however, I do think that they were promulgated with a legitimate authority, and we need to be obedient insofar as obedience is required. And of course, insofar as they don't violate anything that God has commanded, which in these particular cases they don't, which is why Padre Pio was obedient to the liturgical reforms that was happening in his territory at that time. Moreover, there's other information that we have about Padre Pio that tells us he would not have approved of what happened with Marcel Lefebvre. And for example, I interviewed maybe a year ago the personal secretary of Padre Pio. which was a video that was largely overlooked. And to this day, I feel very, um, I think that that's very telling, I should say. Here we have the secretary of a saint telling us about the saint and his experiences with him firsthand. And we largely overlook that, but we will eat up all of the videos about church gossip. What does that tell us? Well, if you go and watch the interview that I had with the personal secretary of Padre Pio, I was asking him questions there. You know, what do you think about some of the resistance and treatment that the Pope currently is receiving? Do you think that Padre Pio would have been on board with it? Go and check out his answer, and then tell me how that lines up with some of the things we see from Lefebvre and the SSPX. Love to get your thoughts there. So why are we scraping the bottom of the barrel for arguments to promote the cause of the Society of St. Pius X and Lefebvre over against more verifiable information, such as people who knew him or actual accounts of Padre Pio himself, what he has actually put out, or what people who knew him say about him? Anyways, those are my thoughts there. Again, I don't think that it's an issue that he kissed his ring, and I don't think that therefore means he approved of everything that he did. Now, last thing, reaction to my recent video on Taylor Marshall. I've noticed that a lot of people in this crowd, whenever you engage them, and I'm talking about the radical traditionalist crowd, I've noticed whenever you engage them, they're a lot like the liberals, insofar as they tend, not all, but they tend to be overly emotional, overly reactionary, rash, and have a lack of ability to rationally consider what you're saying. Now, that might sound harsh, but it's true. Now, I'm not saying this of everybody. I'm just saying broad overview, painting with a broad brush. That's the experience that I've had. It's the same experience that I've had with liberals. Again, overly emotional, irrational, unwilling to actually engage the content honestly and rationally and calmly and respectfully. I have the same experience with both of those. Now, there have been some liberals that I've spoken to who weren't like that, as there have been some radical traditionalists who aren't like that. There's exceptions here. I'm just saying, broadly speaking, that's been my experience. And that certainly continues to be confirmed with the reaction to the recent video that I did. Only a 5-minute video, but it asks whether or not some of the content of Taylor Marshall leads to schism. And what I mostly got was personal ad hominem attacks by people who were claiming that I was attacking the character of Taylor Marshall. Think about that for a moment. Think about that. Which not once in the video did I attack his character. I engaged his content. Engaging content does not equal personal attack. Those are not the same thing. Please learn the difference if you're confused on those. Engaging a person's content charitably is not the same as a personal attack. But the people who are accusing me of personally attacking him are the same ones that in the same message would personally attack me. The irony here, it confirms what I've also noticed about people is they usually, whenever somebody comes out of nowhere and accuses you of something that you think, wow, that's just really out of nowhere. What are you talking about? It's usually they're accusing something that they see in themselves. Or maybe don't see in themselves, but it's something that they themselves do. Over and over and over, I was called a modernist as well. I found it interesting that unless you're on Team Marshall and agree with what Marshall says, you're a modernist automatically. That's interesting, given that I completely oppose modernism. And I could probably tell you more about modernism than the people who are speaking about modernism. And I was also talking about modernism way before Taylor Marshall was ever red-pilled. So I thought, wow, that's completely unfounded and the exact opposite of the truth. It's clear that this person has not given me a fair shake here. Yet they're the very people saying that I'm not fairly representing Taylor Marshall. Well, why is it that people are able to make that claim, but then not able to ask the question, am I fairly and accurately representing this person? I would encourage everybody who saw the video that I did with Taylor Marshall or engaging Taylor Marshall. Again, it's called Does Taylor Marshall's Content Lead to Schism? Or Does Taylor Marshall's Show Lead to Schism? Go and watch that video. Then also go and watch my other videos. And tell me, am I a modernist? There was something else that was also said. In fact, there were many things. But there was one person who said, Taylor Marshall, if you're reading this comment, you must be doing something right for these modernists to go after you. Again, engaging a person's content is not necessarily going after them. But notice that you must be doing something right for the modernists, again, calling me a modernist, to go after you. You know, these little trite comments like that, I could easily just push back and say, well, Jesus also spoke about blessed are those who revile you for my name's sake. And I could quote those things and just say, well, your proof, what you're saying about me, which is a lie, is proof that I'm doing the right thing, because Jesus told us that people would lie about us and slander us and we would be blessed for it. And I could just throw that right back at her, which I didn't. But I'm just saying, if you're going to be consistent and you're going to use these kinds of arguments, just make sure that you're accurate. Otherwise, you know, it could actually be that you're the one who is going contrary to Scripture, and it could be that the person you're criticizing is actually the one that is manifesting or doing whatever God is asking them to do. I mean, only ultimately God knows the answer there, but I'm just saying, try to be consistent. There was another one that I found interesting. Why don't you talk about the Pope? You talk about Taylor Marshall, but why aren't you talking about the Pope? Was it about 2 or 3 days right before the Taylor Marshall video? I did a video criticizing Pope Francis's handling of the situation with Nancy Pelosi and Archbishop Cordileone. It was literally just a few days before that. I guess the person didn't even bother to look that up. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages like these of people accusing me of things that they have no idea what they're talking about and didn't even bother to look into it. And I'll tell you what the point is here in a moment. Others said things like, you know, Rad Trads aren't the problem, liberals are the problem. Kind of this either or. How about both are the problem? Liberals are the problem for being in dissent, and a lot of Rad Trads are also in dissent. They're also a problem. I have an additional concern with Rad Trads, though, because what the Rad Trads are doing is they're saying, I'm responding to the liberals, and I'm the solution, in my view, is the solution to the liberals, when in fact they're not offering me a solution, they're just offering me more dissent. The liberals aren't trying to be the solution to the problem of Rad Trads in most cases. Most Rad Trads, however, are presenting themselves as the faithful traditional Catholic solution to the problem of liberalism and the crisis in the modern church. We all recognize there's a crisis in the modern church, even though a lot of those commenters don't know that I actually recognize that because they haven't bothered to watch any of my content. But we all recognize that there's a crisis in the church. The question is, what is the appropriate solution? And again, a lot of Rad Trads present their particular perspective as the solution. And I want to say, not only is it not the solution, it's adding to the problem. So it's even more problematic in a sense because you're trying to respond to the church crisis, and it comes with this appearance of faithful traditionalism, fidelity to tradition, fidelity to the Word of God, fidelity to the Catholic Church. It comes under that appearance and guise, and in fact, it's not that in some cases. Not that they're wrong about everything. In some cases, it's right. But again, in some cases, what they're presenting is not right. And again, it comes in the appearance of traditional and faithful. And that makes it even more problematic because the liberals are incredibly conspicuous. The liberals are, it's so incredibly obvious how out of tune they are with the church and tradition and sacred scripture, most importantly. It's so obvious. It's a little less obvious in the case of somebody who has a rosary and is telling you to pray the rosary, is telling you to listen to the church, but then actually goes and tells you to dissent from the church elsewhere. It's a little bit harder to, to see the problem there. There were some other people who mentioned about how Marshall has helped them so much in their content. And you know what? Some of Marshall's content has helped me in the past too. But that isn't the question. The question is it the case that some of Marshall's content is leading people away? So a lot of people weren't actually engaging the content of the video. My point was not to say that Marshall never does any good. My point is to say there are a lot of people reporting that they are falling away. I don't think that they're right to leave the church, but they are reporting that they're just connecting the dots from what Taylor Marshall was telling them. And I think that we need to address that. So pointing me to how much Taylor Marshall has helped you in the past doesn't really answer the question, but is he also not helping others with some of the other content? And that was really the point of the video. But you'll notice a theme here. People calling me a modernist when that's one of the things that I oppose. And again, that's one of the things I've been talking about way before Taylor Marshall was ever talking about any of these things. People saying that, liberals, they're the problem, not the radical traditionalists. You'll notice a theme here. The theme is an inability to make distinctions and an inability to be balanced. And isn't that the very problem? Isn't that the very thing that attracts them to content like Taylor Marshall and others? Isn't that content itself often not balanced, often unable to make important distinctions when those distinctions are necessary? I think whenever you have a show that fails to do those things, it just continues to breed that mentality, and you see it in its followers and in its commenters. They're also unable to make those distinctions. So whenever somebody comes and challenges some of the things that they're saying, they automatically assume they're modernist. It's absurd. They're just simply unable to make basic distinctions because what they're being fed most of the time is also not making important distinctions. So those are just some of my thoughts. However, I wanted to give y'all an opportunity to express any concerns that you have with my content or anyone else's, any comments that you wanted to offer. Go ahead and put them in the chat. Make sure to put it to @Reason in Theology. If you don't agree with what I say, that's fine. Go ahead and put that in the chat, and I'll be happy to charitably engage and discuss whatever you would like to talk about. I do see something here. More comedy hour stuff. Come on. But I will be doing some patron content today, by the way. Y'all are due. So in fact, I was supposed to do that yesterday, but didn't get a chance. So it's going to be today and tomorrow. Okay, let me look through the chat. All right, so it's not Marshall's content that is a problem, I guess, but people's erring views about the papacy. You're a perfect example of what I was just criticizing. You're a perfect example of that. Today, I've seen your comments before. You've made this inability to be balanced. You've expressed that in other comments, and you're doing it here. Thank you for this comment because you're proving my point. It's both. It's both. Why can't it be both? Why do you have to say it's one or the other? It's both. It's this overreactionary content that you tend to see from folks like Taylor Marshall that is a problem, and it's airing views about the papacy. People who have an ultramontanist understanding, and here I'm not using the term historically, I'm using it in the way that it's being abused today. those who have this hyper-papalist understanding of the papacy, which I was accused of, by the way, for doing the video. I'm a hyper-papalist, even though that's not absolutely not my position. Why can't it be both? How about this erring view of the papacy that I see from content like Taylor Marshall? How about this erring view? The erring view that doesn't recognize that there is religious submission of intellect and will to what the Pope teaches in his non-definitive yet authoritative magisterium. Or what about this erring view of the papacy? That Pope Francis has been accused by Taylor Marshall of teaching heresy when he didn't teach heresy. Or what about this erring view of the papacy? That Pope Francis and other post-conciliar popes are promulgating liturgical universal decrees that are harmful and destructive to souls. What about those erring views of the papacy? Why don't you engage those today, respectfully? So I want to say it's true that there are people who have erring views of the papacy, but why do you ignore, or seemingly tend to ignore, because I have brought it to your attention in the videos that you've commented on and have seen, why do you not see the problems there and say that, how about it's both? It's both some of the content that we see from Marshall and some of the others who are not in his camp. You're a perfect example of what I was just trying to express. Thank you for your comment. Who else is in the chat commenting? Let's see. Is this from Roberto? Thanks for great content, keeping you in my prayers, brother. Thank you. I appreciate it. What are my favorite religious orders in the Latin-Rite? Probably Dominicans. I mean, not that the Dominicans are doing so great right now, but probably Dominicans. If I was going to be a religious in the Latin-Rite and had that opportunity, I mean, I'm married with kids, but I'm just saying if in another parallel universe you give me the choice, yeah, probably Dominican, but more of the traditional, not some of the stuff that I've seen from some of the more modern Dominicans. I remember I invited out to my Latin-Rite parish a person who was over the Third Order Dominicans in the territory. And, you know, we had this Novus Ordo that was, you know, a high Novus Ordo. And they sat through the liturgy before they had the meeting telling us about the Third Orders. And she said, wow, that's what I call a high mass. And I was just thinking, you thought that was a high liturgy? It's just a regular Novus Ordo that's just done properly. What are you talking about? that kind of gives you a feel of where some of the Third Order Dominicans are. Not all of them. I'm just saying the ones that I've dealt with, I wasn't too impressed by. Yeah, so maybe more of a traditional approach to the Dominicans. Keep up the great work. Your discussions have been incredibly helpful to me, Shane says. Thank you. I appreciate it. Torek, Mr. Thank you for being a voice of reason and theology in these harsh times. I appreciate it. Okay, so here's a good point. So this is from Cooper Johnson. I think radical traditionalists have a far shorter road back to communion than most liberals. This is why it seems so jarring for Pope to be harsh on Rad Trads than Germany for X. I think you have a good point here. You're true. You're right when you say they have less of a journey. A lot of the liberals are just so far removed from Scripture, so far removed from the magisterium that they have a long way to go. Whereas with some of the radical traditionalists, it's much more subtle. But I don't think that is really, that's really the point, because you read Nestorius, and I know some say that Nestorius wasn't a Nestorian. Let's just pretend he was a Nestorian for the moment, though, just for the sake of the analogy. You read Nestorius. I was just reading him again here, his second letter to Cyril. And there are some aspects in it that are problematic. It seems like he doesn't understand the concepts of communicatio, or the communication of idioms. And it seems like that's his main problem, because he even wants to recognize that there are two natures united in one person, which is the traditional view. But then he stresses these two natures to the point that it does seem that he's presenting some rupture. And his main problem, it seems to be, is the communication of idioms that Cyril is using. But again, overall, you look at the things that he's professing, he's like 99% spot on. But it's that 1%, that it's like, man, that 1% can kill you, you know. Again, I understand some have tried to say Nestorius wasn't a Nestorian. I'm just saying, let's say that he was for the moment. There were some things that he was saying, at least in this letter. I don't know if he reformed them maybe later on. But there were some things in this letter that he was saying that it's that 1% that could really kill you, because it's that 1%. If you just carry it to its logical conclusion, it will lead you to Nestorianism. So did Nestorius have a very long journey compared to the liberals from orthodoxy? No, it was pretty close, but it's that slight bit that he was off that was really significant. And that's even more problematic because the person looks so orthodox that it's more subtle and it's harder to see the problem there. However, I will say that, yeah, I don't think that it's very prudent for the Pope to clamp down on some radical traditionalists to the exclusion of the German bishops and others like that. I do think that that's somewhat imprudent. Not that he ever hasn't engaged some more of the liberal Catholics. He has. But I understand what's being communicated here. Like, for example, in Traditionis Custodes, the Pope is trying to deal with abuses in the liturgy with both liberals and radical traditionalists. But he only puts the teeth behind problems with the radical traditionalists. He doesn't put any teeth behind abuses in the Novus Ordo. He decries them, but he doesn't put any teeth behind them. And so that's my concern is, well, you're putting penalties on people with some of these problems in radical traditional quarters, but you're not really doing the same with liberals. That's a concern. And I think that that's imprudent. And I think that we can charitably say that. So I do think that you're right insofar as there is a disproportionate treatment here. And I don't think it should be disproportionate. I think that the Pope should be addressing problems with the German bishops first and foremost. I would deal with that way before I would deal with the radical traditionalists if I were the Pope. But then I would also go and deal with some of the problems I'm seeing in that quarter, kind of like I try to do here on the channel. Now, some might say, well, you don't address the German bishops as much as you address some of the radical traditionalists. Well, I totally understand that. That's also because in the circles that I run in, there's a million people already talking about the liberals and people like that. There's not a lot of people engaging the radical traditionalists and the problems there. And so there's a need to address it. But if you're a Pope, you have to look at the whole grand scheme of things and the church universally. And I think if you're in that position, one of the biggest problems right now is going to be that stuff that you see in the church. And then you can go and address some of these other issues. That's my opinion. I know the Pope sees different. I assume that he has good intentions, but again, just having good intentions doesn't get you all the way to being successful in your pontificate. All right. So, well, do you think bishops can ask the ICK and FSSP to do the ordinary form? And if so, can they refuse? Yeah, this is a good question. And it's something I need to look more into, because isn't there something in their charter that would address this? If there's something in or constitution, I forget which one it is, but isn't there something in their official documents that speaks about what their charism is? I'd have to look and see more what that says, but I do think it's a problem if somebody in the ICK and FSSP doesn't want to do the Novus Ordo as a matter of principle, as a matter of, I think that it's corrupt. It's not the ordinary form. That's a problem. But if they're saying, I'm not going to do it, not because it's a problem to celebrate properly, but because that's not my charism and that's not the purpose of our institute. I can see that a little bit more. I would be more troubled if it was a diocesan priest refusing, because again, they might not necessarily have, they're not part of an institute that was specifically established to carry out that extraordinary form. So diocesan priests, I think, should be able to do both the ordinary form and extraordinary form, and I think that they should do both and do both reverently. I think every ordinary, I promise you, if I was Pope tomorrow, every Roman Rite priest would be required to do both forms, every one of them, because there's a whole bunch of Roman Rite priests who are doing the ordinary form that think that the extraordinary form is evil, and that the church was wrong for doing this before, and it's so great that we've now reformed the liturgy. That's a problem too. You can't call the extraordinary form just evil and see it as a mistake of the church. That's also a problem. So I would require all those ordinary form priests to also do the extraordinary form, and then the extraordinary form priests to do the ordinary form, so that there's a good balance there. But specifically with their institute, I'd have to look into their founding documents more, and I haven't done so. So I'm not able to speak to that completely at this time. But maybe if you have some information there, let me know. Let's see. So if Taylor Marshall will criticize the Pope and the church, he should also offer countermeasures or clarifications without leaving the faithful wondering. Well, he sometimes does, from what I've seen, offer some countermeasures to say, it's not right to leave the church or something. Like he'll try to balance it out, but my problem is I don't think it's balanced enough. And still some of the things that are being said are false and wrong and are in dissent, and that's part of the problem. And some of his positions he has not clarified, and that's also a problem, because people like Marshall and others will criticize the Pope for not being clear and for being ambiguous, but then they'll do the same in some cases. They won't clarify their position and they'll still remain ambiguous, as Marshall has done in some particular cases with the Pope in relation to heresy and loss of office. There's some points there that still need further clarification, which he hasn't offered to my knowledge. So again, he tries to balance it out. I don't think that it's sufficiently balanced. Moreover, some of the content that he's putting out, even if you try to balance it out, it's still false content. It's still false claims. It's still false information that's in dissent and is wrong. And so how can you balance out something that's wrong? Taylor Marshall is basically right about all aspects of the modern church. I would challenge that. I would be in agreement with some of his assessment of the modern church, but I would challenge that he's right about all aspects of the modern church. But that's a pretty broad claim anyway, so you'll have to get more specific. Michael, sometimes you're too balanced and make too many distinctions. Just kidding, keep it up. But some will make that, and some have made that criticism, and they'll say that you just have too many distinctions. What was the guy from Crisis Magazine who's over 1 Peter 5 now? What's his name? I forget his name. He goes on with Taylor Marshall. He's over Crisis Magazine, and he recently acquired 1 Peter 5. Drawing a blank, but that guy, I remember one time he said something in a tweet, Lord, may I not be like those who make too many distinctions, or something like that. Or save me from being a person who makes distinctions, or something like that. And I thought, and I just posted back something along the lines of, yeah, I said no Trinitarian Chalcedonian ever. In other words, you're trying to be safe from distinctions, but how can you be a Trinitarian Chalcedonian without making some pretty serious distinctions? You have to. It's incredibly necessary there. But I get the gist of what he's saying. In some cases, we're making distinctions that are not applicable. They're distinctions without a difference. They're not called for. They're not warranted. They're not legitimate. So I understand that sometimes that can be abused. I think some of the distinctions that Father James Martin makes are distinctions without a difference, and they don't help his case. They don't get him out of hot water. He's still in hot water, even with the distinctions he's trying to make. Well, I didn't teach anything against dogma. Well, you don't have to in order to say something that's destructive to souls. That's a useless distinction. So again, bringing it back to the point, yeah, some people can overdo it. I try to be balanced whenever we're called to be balanced, and I try to be black and white whenever we're called to be black and white. On the question, is Jesus fully God? You have to be black and white. Yes, he is. But now on the question is Jesus God? Amen. Yeah, now we got to make some distinctions. He's fully God, fully man, right? And now we have to start to add some nuance. So there's some things that are black and white, but then there's some things that need to be qualified and we need to make distinctions on. And I try to do that. Let's look through the chat, see what else there is. Oh, this is a good question. Emmanuel asks, has the definition of modernism changed over the years? It has. Modernism meant a lot of things, but what Pius X, lamentably, and others, what he's trying to deal with, especially with the oath of modernism, which I think he was pretty successful with overall. What he was trying to engage is those who would effectively reinterpret all of the dogmas of the church so that they would say, I believe the resurrection, or I believe the deity of Christ, or anything else in the creed. But when you ask them, well, what is the resurrection? It's something completely different than Jesus bodily rising from the dead. I mean, it's just, so you say those words, but you completely put a different meaning behind it. Vatican I had already, though it wasn't really dealing with modernism yet, it had already preemptively refuted that problem. And that is, any dogma, the meaning and the proposition of the dogma has to remain the same. You can't change the meaning and proposition so that you say, I believe in the deity of Christ. What is the deity of Christ? Well, it has nothing to do with the divinity of Jesus. It's that pink elephants fly in the moon. It's just completely unrelated to what we mean by the deity of Christ. Well, Vatican I had already addressed that. And that tends to be the problem with original modernism. Most people today don't, well, at least most people in the Catholic Church don't have that problem. So they're not modernists technically. They don't meet the original definition of modernism. I would call it more neo-modernism or modernist tendencies, is how I would describe some people in the church today. Because you listen to some of these liberals, they're not going to deny the Nicene Creed, and they're not going to deny the dogmas, and they won't change the meaning of the dogmas. In some cases, I mean, some of them will. But in a lot of cases, they won't change the meaning of the dogmas. They'll do something else. They'll just completely go around it. And what they'll do is they'll go with a discipline that contradicts it. And they'll say, well, I'm not denying the dogma, but your discipline is completely contrary to it. There's some tension there. There's that move. Or they'll put things into doubt and question that are technically not dogmatically defined, but are of a lower grade of a theological note, and they'll just put that into doubt whenever, even if something doesn't have the note of a dogma, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's reformable. It just kind of depends on what note we're talking about, but they'll usually use a note lower than that, lower than dogma, and they'll just put it up for grabs. And that's why we have the theological notes. And you could still see, you know, the distinction there, even in the profession of faith promulgated by John Paul II, where you still have these this tier or theological notes there, albeit a little different than the theological notes in the pre-conciliar era, which was never uniform, by the way. There was never a uniform set of theological notes. But I would say the substance of those theological notes endures in what John Paul II has promulgated, especially in light of Donum Veritatis. Maybe we should do a whole show on that another time. I seem to have gotten completely off topic here. We're into the theological notes, and you just asked me about modernism. Okay, so Alex asks, should more people address the overarching problem of lacking the mental framework, both and, rather than just either or, in not just this case, but in other cases like matters? So you're asking me, should more people, I guess, like on YouTube, be addressing the problem of the failure to employ the both and? Yes, whenever it's necessary. There's some cases where it's not necessary to employ both and. There's some cases where it is either or. My problem is that in some of the cases that I'm hearing an either or, the both and is applicable. So like we saw earlier with Te Deum, it's not Taylor Marshall that's the problem, it's all the liberals or whatever that's in the problem. Or it's all the people who have false views of the papacy. Okay, well, it's actually both, because Taylor Marshall has false views about the papacy, and other people who aren't in his camp also have false views of the papacy. They're all the problem. Okay, yeah. So Kevin, I appreciate the clarification. I think that you may be right. There's some confusion misidentifying Institute of Christ, the King, Sovereign Priest, with the canons of Saint John Cantius. You're probably right there. I might have some confusion. That's why I was a little confused whenever I read that from Catholic culture. Whenever I went for this visit, I remember Saint Stanislaus was ICKSP. I thought the canons at Saint John Cantius were too. But even if they aren't, so I don't know if John Cantius is in the crosshairs with this issue with ICKSP. Maybe they're not. I sure hope that they aren't, because Cantius was awesome. But even if Cantius is distinct from the ICKSP issue with allegedly with Cupich, I still, what I saw from the Institute of Christ the King, from the priests over there at St. Stanislaus, and I'm sure it's applicable to people who are in the Chicago Archdiocese as well. I saw some really good priests and some really good people, and I saw some really good liturgies. And I just don't think that should be taken away. Might there be problems with some radical traditionalists who go to these liturgies, and might there even be some priests in some of these institutes that have some problematic views? Yes. And we need to address that, but I don't think the solution is to remove the Latin Mass right now. I think that we're in no position to do that. My take is, ultimately, there does need to be just one form of the Roman Rite. It does not make very much sense that there's two forms, but we're not there yet. We're not there. So in other words, something like Traditionis Custodes trying to move us to just one form is premature. Whenever we have the vast majority of ordinary form priests properly celebrating the ordinary form, and it's done reverently, and it's respectful to the Roman Rite and respectful to the Eucharist, and it's practically in continuity with the Roman Rite's preconciliar tradition, and is what really the Roman Rite was asked to be and reformed to be by Vatican II. Whenever you have that, I think then it's time to integrate those extraordinary form parishes into an ordinary form and just integrate them so that you have one form. We're not there. Right now, the people who are doing reverent liturgies in the Roman Rite tend to be the ones that are doing the extraordinary form. You do have some reverent ordinary form liturgies. You do have that. I'm just saying, on the whole, the ordinary form liturgies tend to be the places where you have a lot of abuses, and there's reasons for that. But the point is to say the ordinary form is just not ready for that. We're not ready to have one form. If we were doing better with the ordinary form, we would be ready for that, but we're not. So it doesn't make sense to try to go to this idea of having just one form right now. Maybe 200 years from now, a pope will need to go ahead and make that move. I don't think we're anywhere near that point. So in the meantime, I think that you do need to have the extraordinary form available to help balance out some of the abuses that we're seeing in the ordinary form. And anybody who's in the extraordinary form who is using that as a means to dissent from the magisterium and dissent from Vatican II, then address that on a case-by-case basis. I think that would be more prudent. But that's my take. And that's really always been my take. But for some reason, people don't actually listen to what I have to say and instead speculate on what I think and condemn me for things I don't hold to. But that's probably irrational, and rash views like that is probably why they tend to be the same people who hold to incoherent and irrational views. Anyway, let's see. Don't forget the erring view of the papacy that extends infallibility beyond the limits of what the church teaches. There's some truth to what you're saying. There have been some people who have thought that, anything that the Pope says, even outside of his magisterium, is infallible, or that they think anything an ecumenical council teaches is infallible. So there's some problems there. I would agree with you. However, there are some things that are outside of the teachings of the Pope that are infallible. Infallible in the sense that not that they're irreformable, but infallible insofar as that there is a safety there, and the Holy Spirit is still at work protecting it, not to allow the destruction of souls with whatever's being promulgated. Specifically, liturgical decrees and disciplinary decrees that are universal in scope, those may still be reformed, so they're not infallible in that sense. However, and they could even be imprudent. However, they would not destroy souls if somebody is going to obey them. So there is a safety there. So that's what I would call an infallible safety, rather than just infallibility proper. So you don't want to forget that either. So you want to balance out what you're saying there. You want to be a little bit more balanced than that. Okay, so I would argue traditionalists end up denying papal infallibility by denying the councils, even though they say he can't bind the church to err. Do all radical traditionalists say that? Some do say that he can bind the church to err. They'll just say that we're not actually bound to those things. So I mean, there's obviously an inconsistency there, because they're saying, well, some of them are different. I mean, there are some people who just say that whenever the Pope issues this or that liturgical decree, it's not binding at all. And there's certainly a problem there. But you say they end up denying papal infallibility by denying the councils. Not exactly. They don't necessarily end up in that problem, because they could just say, well, I'm not denying the infallible teachings of the councils, and the councils did infallibly teach that the Pope is infallible. So they don't necessarily end up in the criticism that you're mentioning there, but some might. I mean, again, there's a million different views here among radical traditionalists, so you can't just say they're all this particular way. Okay. Sean says Franciscans are the best. That's funny. So Marshall and others like him are useful to be taken with a grain of salt. I follow him only for news nowadays, not that he is always wrong. I would even say, even in what he reports as news is sometimes problematic, and it's not just news that he's reporting. It's also his spin and interpretation of that news. They're not the same thing. Okay, looking through the chat. Oh, I don't think that was to me. Somebody asked, what about modernists that use the extraordinary form? But I think that was directed at somebody else. Okay, YVF says, the clips with Father Christian Cops has been a real treat. Is the whole talk available? Yes. And thank you. I appreciate it. Go to any one of those clips, look at the description, and there's a link to the full video. What else we have in the chat? So first things, just publish a critical review of Tradition and Apocalypse by David Bentley Hart. Yeah, I saw that. I briefly read just a few paragraphs. Any chance that you will provide a take? Traditionalists and Tradition and Apocalypse challenges the Newman development of doctrine. Maybe. I don't understand why some Orthodox do that, why they try to go after the development of doctrine. But then again, is David Bentley Hart really Orthodox anyway? I mean, I know he hasn't been excommunicated or censored by his bishop, but from what he's put out, is he really Orthodox? I mean, whenever I interviewed him on the show, I kept asking him questions about the liturgy that goes against what he was saying, and he had no problem dismissing the liturgy. Well, okay, well, I think when you're at the point where you could just completely dismiss the liturgy, can you really say that you're in good standing with the Orthodox? I don't know. I'll leave that for the Orthodox to decide. Let's see. Favorite apocryphal book: First Enoch, Didache, First Clement. Probably the Didache. Let's see. Still looking through the chat. Sean asks, "How is prison?" in reference to Michael from The Office, Prison Mike. Weren't you the one who posted in the chat something like, "There were all the Dementors there, and they hoit." They were flying around and they hoit. The Office is probably one of the funniest shows ever. Yeah, I like Prison Mike. I kind of like Date Mike too, though. Those who don't watch The Office have no idea what we're talking about. Yeah, what do I think of having Ralph Morton on to discuss charismatic renewal among Catholics? I talked about him. I talked with him doing that at one point. I don't remember what happened to it. I'm still willing to. Thunder Thumbs, thank you for the super chat. What do you think about bishops asking TLM societies to also do the ordinary form? And can they refuse to do this because of their charism? Right. I think that was the question earlier. Yeah, I'll need more information. But I don't think that even with something in their constitution or documents that they should refuse to do it on matter of principle. It needs to be because, well, this is the way we're established, not because I think that the Roman Rite in the ordinary form is somehow evil or is not the Roman Rite. That's a problem. So I would have to first ask, what are the intentions here? Okay. Still looking through the chat. Okay. Seeing a lot of comments. Okay. All right. So here's something from Te Deum. To turn that around, if you hold that nothing is wrong with the Novus Ordo per se, on what basis do you refuse to celebrate it? That's just running a museum. I'm not following. Yeah, I'm not following your question. I mean, as far as me, I don't take the position that there's nothing wrong with the Novus Ordo, even with the way it's officially promulgated. I think that there's some things that were promulgated that were imprudent, and we need to reform those, such as some of the readings that were taken out, such as some of the prayers that were taken out, some of the repetition that was taken out. And I know Sacrosanctum Concilium asked for us to reduce those, but I think that maybe they were reduced too much. So I don't recognize my position in your question, so I'm not sure I'm really following. I'm seeing some of the same questions here. Oh, Eric Salmons. Yeah, right. That's the name that I was looking for earlier. Yes. Okay, so to what extent is it fair to see Pope Francis as a victim of circumstance? Maybe if Pope Pius X had to answer questions in a plane, he'd say some weird stuff too. There's some truth to the idea that some people run with everything that is said and completely twist things and misreport it. And in some cases, they don't misreport it and they're accurate in what they're saying. But I've had this done to me, and I'm a very, very small, I have a very, very small presence on social media. And I've seen people take what I say and completely run with it and twist it. So I can only imagine if you're a pope, how people would do that to you. So I imagine there's a whole lot of abuse happening here. There's a lot of people misreporting what Pope Francis says, running with it, taking it out of context. There is that. And then there's sometimes where, no, they're rightly criticizing something Pope Francis did say, and he did mean it in that context, and he did say it. So there are some times that I think the Pope says things that are imprudent. My take is stop giving interviews. Stop. If you're going to give an interview, make sure that it's prepared, you have the questions in advance, and that the answers are reviewed by trained theologians, the CDF. I think that's what Benedict did and other popes, to my knowledge. I could be wrong here. And maybe Pope Francis does that to an extent. I don't know. I don't get the impression, though, that that's the case. In some cases, I'm saying off-the-cuff remarks that have never been filtered. Stop doing that. I think that's imprudent. Because what one is doing at that point is they're opening themselves up to say something that they shouldn't say and to mislead a lot of people. I have to try to avoid saying some of that off the cuff myself. Now, I have a very small social media presence, so it's not the same as a pope. By the time, however, you're a pope, everybody's listening, the whole world's listening, and people are ready to take things out of context. So it might be the most prudent thing to do is to just no longer give these interviews, no longer speak off the cuff. Don't do these papal plane interviews. Stop opening yourself up to people twisting your words or accurately reporting your words that are problematic to begin with. Stop opening yourself up to that. So I think that there's something to be said that I think that the Pope could use some more prudence here. He obviously doesn't see that. He thinks that there's a benefit for continuing to do what he's doing. I don't see the benefit. I think that it's causing more harm than it is good. But that's just my opinion. What else do we have in the chat? Tom says, God bless you, Michael. You have helped me stay grounded in authentic Catholic Church teachings. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you. It's always encouraging to hear. There were a lot of people who came out after that video engaging Taylor Marshall, saying, I really appreciate your content. Thank you so much for putting this out. It's saving souls. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's helpful. And it definitely balances out all of the nastiness that I encounter. I think that one of the most toxic groups that I have to engage has been that crowd and the Jay Dyer crowd. Those are the two most toxic groups I have to deal with. But you know what? Some of this stuff just has to be said. It has to be addressed. But I'll tell you, I have not encountered as much vitriol among the Muslims or atheists as I have with that group. Those two groups. Which is curious because they're cut from the same cloth. They have the exact same problems, the exact same tendencies. They just have slightly different theological views. But they're two sides to the same coin. Which maybe explains why they tend to be as toxic as they are. But again, this is not everybody who's in those crowds. There are some people who are in the Dyer crowd. There's some people who are in the Radical Traditionalist crowd who aren't like that. I understand that. I'm just talking generally speaking. Looking through the chat. For many Protestants, church discipline is a mark of the true church. It seems in a lot of the teachings within the Roman Catholic Church, church discipline should be administered. Why is it not? I totally agree that church discipline should be administered in many cases and that it's not. You ask, why is it not? Because I'm not so sure that our leaders in many cases actually believe it needs to be disciplined. or it needs to be enforced, and that's part of the problem. They also tend to, in some cases, think that they need to employ the medicine of mercy as opposed to discipline, and I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. In some cases, disciplinary measures is the medicine of mercy according to the New Testament. So there tends to be a false dichotomy there. As far as some Protestants thinking that is a mark of the true church, no, not exactly. A mark of the true church would be that you actually are in continuity with the church Christ established. That would be the mark of the true church. Actually visible, identifiable things like that. Discipline is not necessarily something that we see in the New Testament as a mark of the church. And even historic Protestants have not seen discipline as a mark of the church. Again, the marks of the church are more identifiable than that. And I think that that's certainly something that goes back to the New Testament. However, the New Testament itself does speak about enforcing discipline, and we certainly should. But it's certainly not the way that I would determine where is the true church, because frankly, none of the churches are exercising discipline in the way that we should. None. Is there an objection way to identify what is reverent? Okay, is there an objective way to identify what is reverent, specifically when speaking of the liturgy? Yeah, look, I totally understand that there's some subjectivity to the question of reverence, certainly. However, what I'm talking about here as far as reverence is what the church has actually promulgated in the rubrics. Just do that. I think that what it has promulgated in the rubrics is reverent. Just, what is the saying? Is it say the black, do the red, I think? Obviously, I'm not a priest, but so I don't really know the rubrics there, but as far as the language. But I have looked at, however, at the rubrics and, the general instruction of the Roman Missal and many other post-conciliar documents on the liturgy. But I'm drawing a blank on the phrase. I think it's, say the black, do the red. Yeah, because the red is what kind of gives you the description, and then the black is the text that you say. So yeah, it has to be that. But I think that there's some wisdom there, right? Just simply do what the church has told you to do in the instruction to the Roman Missal and in the rubrics. I think you'll be fine as far as reverence is concerned. You start transgressing that, going against it, going beyond that, that's when I think you start to get into trouble. Okay. A lot of comments. Looking for questions. Gregory asks, should we hope for greater liturgical unity in the long term between East and West as well? Or is diversity of liturgical forms better as long as they're historical? It's a good question. I want to distinguish between liturgical diversity within a rite versus liturgical diversity among the rites. As the Second Vatican Council has emphasized, each rite needs to respect their own rights and needs to continue their own rights. I think that there's wisdom there. That's what we need to do. The question is, within the Roman Rite, should there be multiple forms of the rite? That's the question. And so that question is going to be distinct from a consideration of the rites themselves in relation to each other. Okay. I like this from John L. Ex cathedra only counts if the Pope is sitting down. In the early church, that's why it was a cathedra, right? They would teach sitting. That's funny, though. So the Roman Rite needs diversity. We need many rites. Well, I do think that there's good to have many rites. I'm not so sure that the Roman Rite itself should be diverse. I think there's more wisdom to the idea that there should be one form of the Roman Rite one day whenever we're prepared and mature enough for that. We certainly aren't right now. But that's a different consideration of should there only be one rite for the entire church? Um, okay. So somebody's asking here, what are some of the sources that say the decision of the Roman See should be safe? Right. Um, this is a theme that you can find in Donum Veritatis. It's also expressed by Ratzinger, Journet, um, Saliveri, Joachim Saliveri. Was it Father Barry as well? I'd have to go back and look. And then you could also see it in Van Noort, among others. There's others. Those are just a few that are coming to mind. But Donum Veritatis is the more important one there because it's magisterial. Have I seen the other Paul's response to one of your videos in his channel about 2 hours long? I have not. I think the church is doing exactly what St. John I think the future of the church is doing exactly what St. John Cantius, in my opinion. I think I understand your comment there. I think what you're saying is the future of the Roman Rite should look like St. John Cantius. I think that there's some truth there, insofar as we have this intermediate phase where we have two forms of the Roman Rite. But very long-term goal. I think that there should be one form, but we're just not prepared for that. Okay, so Michael, what would be a consistent view to hold about the SSPX and their communion with the Holy Father, with their denial to Vatican II and claim full communion? It seems pretty confusing. Well, I think that it's safe to say that the Society of St. Pius X is canonically irregular. What are the implications of that? That's a more in-depth discussion, but I think it's safe to say that. And I do think it's safe to say there are some things that some people in the Society of St. Pius X have said, and even I've seen from Lefebvre and from their website, however authoritative that is, that are schismatic in nature. Again, their status canonically is irregular, and there's some content that I think is schismatic and harmful to souls. I can't say that I've seen any heresy by anything Lefebvre has said, or heresy by anything on their website. There are some people who frequent SSPX chapels that have spoken or said things that are heretical, but that doesn't mean that that's what the society teaches. That just means that's what a person says who attends and frequents a chapel. But as far as what I've seen Lefebvre say, as far as what I've seen on their website, I've seen some things that are schismatic in nature. The content is schismatic. But again, as far as their canonical relation to the church, I would think we should say what we have seen from the church, and that is that there's an irregularity there. What else do we have in the chat? Okay, so if an ecumenical council can err, then why be a Catholic? Yes, if it can err in its teachings as far as the note of heresy, certainly. So if a council that's ecumenical teaches heresy, I agree with you. Why even be Catholic? I don't think an ecumenical council can teach heresy. If you mean an ecumenical council teaching error in the sense that it promulgates a non-definitive teaching that could later on be reversed, that's something else. That's non-definitive. That's not the note of heresy. But I don't think that's what you mean by error. I suspect what you mean by error is heresy, and I agree with you, which is why I say an ecumenical council can't do that. And so whenever Taylor Marshall accuses Vatican II of teaching the heresy of Pelagianism, as I showed in the video a couple days ago, I think that that's an untenable position. And it's no wonder that some people connect the dots and end up leaving the Catholic Church because of content like that. Now, can it err in matters of fact rather than faith and morals? So, could it err in its claim that Nestorius was a Nestorian or that Honorius was a monothelite? It could. That is not protected from the charism of the Holy Spirit and infallibility. What is protected is its teachings on faith and morals. And so I don't think we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If it erred in a matter of fact, like the Council of Nicaea II, the Seventh Ecumenical Council, that says this father taught this on icons, and in fact, that was inaccurate. That father did not say that. It was somebody else who said it. Can they make mistakes on matters of fact like that? Yes. Should I throw the baby out with the bathwater because it has done that and say that it's no good now in faith and morals? No, that doesn't logically follow. So I want to be balanced there. But I do think once you've gotten to the point that you say it can err in matters of faith and morals insofar as it can teach heresy, you've sold the farm at that point. And it is a matter of fact that the Seventh Ecumenical Council has attributed certain writings to people that did not write it. So that does not mean it erred in its position on faith and morals when it comes to icons, though. Again, the Holy Spirit protects the teachings, not necessarily every utterance on a matter of fact. The church's infallibility would extend to matters of fact only insofar as they are necessarily logically or historically relate to something taught by God. And in this case, that so-and-so taught icons and it doesn't actually go back to so-and-so is not one of those situations. Thank you for the show, Michael. Can you make a show on the changes in the Latin-Rite? I mean, from the earliest time to the 1962 Missal. Wow, that would be a very long show. I actually enjoyed, as far as a short overview of it, Fortescue's book. I think it's called The Roman Mass. It was really good in going over the history. The guy who pronounces didache as didache, or didach. I think James White in his really early days, I remember watching a video where he pronounced it as the didache. He seemed to have corrected that pretty quickly, though. Any thoughts on just splitting the rites and appointing a titular archbishop to govern the old rite? I don't think that is very prudent, given that they are within one rite, the Roman Rite. So splitting out the Roman Rite into multiple rites, I don't think would be a good idea, which is why they didn't do that with the ordinariate. Let's see. Yeah, have you read the Ordo Romanus Primus? I have, but it was a very long time ago, probably 8 years ago. One of the oldest copies of the Roman Mass, and it's pretty similar to the new Missal. There was something, it was either in there, it was a 9th century papal liturgy, I think it was, where they were in the papal liturgy, they would take consecrated wine, so the precious blood, and to make more, they would just add a whole bunch of water to the consecrated wine, and that would just make more consecrated precious blood. That was a little horrifying to see. Yeah, we don't do that today. Yeah. I'm not so sure it works that way. Whenever you have more now unconsecrated wine mixed with consecrated wine, I'm not so sure it still remains substantially consecrated wine. So I'm a little weary of that. But you'll see stuff in the liturgy in the first millennium that you think, wow, that's interesting. Bathing, having a baptism in milk and honey, and or I think they were presented milk and honey afterwards, and just weird stuff. naked baptisms and not everything that's old should be restored. That's antiquarianism. Just because it's old doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Good for the church today. Hey, Mr. Scott, what are you doing to make our dreams come true? That's a reference to Michael Scott from The Office and Scott's Tots. Yeah, that's one of the best episodes. But wait, they're lithium. Again, those who don't know The Office backwards and forwards, probably have no idea what I'm talking about. Please bring back the Hart sayings into the lectionary. Louis Dizon says, yeah, absolutely. I think it's unfortunate that we don't have those in the lectionary. I think there's a whole lot of people who would be listening to the liturgies that need to hear those Hart sayings. I mean, they're in Scripture for a reason. And Scripture was originally to be read, again, in a liturgical context. So it makes very little sense to not have it in the liturgy. I think, in fact, what we need to do is read the entire Bible in the liturgy. That makes sense. Instead of cutting things out and saying, okay, well, we're going to do this part and this reading, just read the whole thing. That's the whole purpose of Scripture, again, originally, is to have that in the liturgical, in a liturgical setting. Okay. So could Pope Francis be restricting the Tridentine Mass because he's assuming that Catholics who prefer it do not approve the Novus Ordo? He tells you explicitly. He tells you explicitly why he's doing it. Read the Traditionis Custodes and the accompanying document. He tells you why. He tells you because there's this fear that some people in these quarters are using it to be in dissent against Vatican II and the magisterium. And that's not unfounded. It is true. There are people in those quarters who have that problem, and that does need to be addressed. I just question the prudence of the motu proprio to fix that. I don't think that fixes that problem as much as it creates additional problems. I think that there's ways to fix that problem in some of these traditionalist quarters without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Anything else in the chat? Any super chats that I'm missing? Somebody yell at me in the chat if I'm missing any super chats. I'm wrapping it up here. Yeah, you should have Father Deacon Galadza on again to speak about the new changes to the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church liturgical rubrics. Yeah. I think that would be interesting. I haven't looked at them. I've heard a little about it, but I haven't really looked into it. Comments on the fact that some Syriac Rite churches have started doing versus populum liturgy. Yeah, I saw that. That it would be partially ad orientem rather than entirely ad orientem, and partially versus populum. Yeah, I just don't see the reason for versus populum in any liturgy. I just don't see it. Some say that there's salutary benefits to it. I don't see what they are. I think that the people who think that versus populum is helpful for them just simply need very basic catechesis on why we do ad orientem. And that should be sufficient. I think that's the solution for their salvation, rather than giving them versus populum. I just haven't seen any good reasons for it. I know that the church in what it has promulgated sees differently. This is one of those prudential areas that I just think that I don't see good enough reason for it. I recognize that the church has this authority. I don't deny that. And I don't think that what the church has promulgated is evil or harmful to souls. My problem with it prudentially is I don't think there's good enough reason to overturn a custom that goes back to the apostles. I don't see it, but I could be wrong. And maybe there are good reasons. I'm just saying where I'm at in my understanding, I just haven't seen what they are. So maybe the Traditionis Custodes was his way of affirming that the Novus Ordo Mass is equally efficacious to the TLM. Well, yeah, but can't we do that without the measures taken in Traditionis Custodes? I mean, that to me is doesn't sound balanced and doesn't sound like the appropriate solution. I could issue, if I were Pope, I could issue a document just simply affirming the equal efficacy of those without taking the measures that he took. So again, I don't think that is the ultimate reason. I think the ultimate reason is he's seeing those problems among some people and he thinks it's time to go ahead and integrate them and force them in to one form. I don't think we're there yet. We're not there yet. If the ordinary form was being celebrated properly, sure, let's talk about that. It's not being celebrated properly, which is why many of these people are in these TLM communities. It's because it's not being celebrated properly. If the Novus Ordo was done properly, especially the way the Vatican II fathers saw it, most people who go to the TLM wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be there because they wouldn't see much of a difference between the TLM and the ordinary form anyway. So they wouldn't have had a reason to go to these communities. The reason why they've gone to these communities is because they're seeking refuge from liturgical abuses. And you know what? If we were in a position where we weren't engaging in those liturgical abuses, it would make sense to have Traditionis Custodes. We're not there, which is why I've said from day one it's premature. When I first came into Catholicism, I thought ex cathedra means exactly that when he sits in his chair. Well, ex cathedra means from the chair of St. Peter. So there's some truth to that, but he doesn't actually have to sit in the chair to issue anything ex cathedra. So he doesn't go and sit, in St. John Lateran's sits in the chair there. Although that would kind of be cool. And that would also be a good way for us to know that something is ex cathedra, if there's any question on it. Did he sit in the chair and read the Apostolic Constitution to us from the chair? That'd be a really easy way to identify it. Can you discuss the death penalty? I did a whole show on it. Go watch it. A whole show in depth on it. Okay. Do you think there needs to be some clarification on the new liturgy being exclusively the Roman Rite? I don't understand. It makes me ask, what is the Latin Mass? I don't understand your question. The ordinary form is the Roman Rite in its ordinary form. The extraordinary form liturgy is the Roman Rite in its extraordinary form. I don't understand your question. They're both a Roman Rite. They're two forms of the Roman Rite. Are you saying we need to tolerate bad liturgy so that it can improve over time? Wendy, thank you for your question because it's a perfect example of what I've been saying. And I appreciate the opportunity to answer and clarify, but it's a perfect example of what I've been saying, that I'll say something and then people take it some other place that's way off base and doesn't logically follow. And again, if people do that to me with a very small social media presence, I can only imagine how much that's done to people like Pope Francis. No, that's not what I'm saying. And I don't know how that would logically follow from anything I've ever said. But to answer your question, I don't think that we need to tolerate bad liturgy to improve it over time. What I'm questioning is the way in which we are challenging bad liturgies. That's what I'm questioning. So I want to say we need to challenge bad liturgies in a way that is not in dissent from the magisterium and in a way that is not sinfully disobedient. That's my position. We need to challenge those bad liturgies, and I have. And I've also dealt with negative consequences that have come from it that have been costly. So I've put my money where my mouth is. I've dealt with bad liturgies. I've stood up to them, and it's been costly for me. So I say this from experience. We should do those things, but I also say that we don't need to do so in a way that's sinfully disobedient to the magisterium and goes too far. That's my position. But thank you for the question. What's harmful to souls from the SSPX? The claim that if you go to a Novus Ordo liturgy, even if it's celebrated properly liturgically, actually that you should not attend that liturgy. I think that's harmful to souls, yes. Because now you're telling people in situations where they don't have access to the sacraments that they should not receive the sacraments at a good Novus Ordo liturgy. I think that's a problem, and that is on their website. There is the possibility that the TLM will bring the bad Novus Ordo back to reverence. I imagine you mean bad Novus Ordo as far as abuses and not the actual promulgation of it. But yeah, that was the whole purpose of the motu proprio summorum pontificum. So was it very prudent that Pope Francis reversed that? Not exactly. I don't think so. Give me 1 second. I hear my son here at the door. Let me go and see what he wants. Let me take a brief break here, and we'll come back for just a few more moments.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now.
All right. Let's finish up with just a few more questions. Let's see here. Don't we fix things that are wrong by presenting what is good? Sure, but that is not exactly what's being done with some people in the radical traditionalist community, hence the critique that I've offered. Can't believe Michael would choose his son over us. Family first, man. Family first. Which is one of the benefits of being able to, do the show here on, right next to the house. Thank you for the super chat, Joey. Follow up. I thought Traditionis Custodes said the Novus Ordo is the unique expression of the lex orandi of the Roman Rite. Am I misreading this? You're not misreading it, which has caused some people to think that we can't use the terms extraordinary and ordinary anymore. Although then those terms are used afterwards, after TC. So here's my thing with that. The Pope has been unclear what he has meant by that. So until the Pope is clear on what he means by that, I'm going to go with the more clear terms. Whenever he is more clear on what he means by that, we'll go from there. But until then, I have to go with what's more clear to interpret the less clear. And he just hasn't offered any further clarification on that, to my knowledge. So I can tell you what I think he means by that and stuff like that, but that's just speculation on my part. So, hey, who knows? We'll maybe see what the Pope means by that. For now, I just interpret that in accord with what's more clear. So I still use the terms. I mean, what other terms has he given us as an alternative to describe the difference between the extraordinary form and the ordinary form, which he still recognizes the difference because he still recognizes that even according to Traditionis Custodes, you're still going to have extraordinary form liturgies that are approved. How do we speak of them unless we use that distinction? He hasn't offered us any alternatives. So, okay, I'm just going to continue to use the same terms that we've been using. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you believe that less than 50% of the Novus Ordos are done badly. I don't think swapping these priests to TLM would help them do their jobs properly. I don't believe that. I think the majority of Novus Ordos are not done properly. But that's my personal opinion. I could be wrong about that. I haven't surveyed every single Novus Ordo church out there. I'm just telling you my impression. My impression is that the majority of Novus Ordos are not being done properly. So I don't agree with you there, and I'm glad that you raised the question because I think that that's wrong. That's not an accurate assessment of my position. Let's see. So what do you think about the souls of SSPX priests? Are they in danger, and are the priests in mortal sin? I don't know if they're in mortal sin. I mean, in order to be in mortal sin, you have to have grave matter, full knowledge, full consent. How could I ever know such things about an individual? That's for God to determine if they're in some kind of mortal sin. Are they in danger? Potentially. It's certainly potentially dangerous, some of the content that I've seen come from the society. And it's certainly potentially dangerous to be canonically irregular. That being said, can somebody still be saved in their situation? Of course, just as some Orthodox can as well. But does that mean that the Orthodox should not regularize their situation with the Holy See? They should still do so. There is a danger there. Even though they have salvation available to them through the sacraments, there's still a reason why they need to be in communion with the Holy See, and it's not just merely accidental. This is important. So I kind of see them in the same way that I would see the Orthodox on that particular matter. Not that they're in the same situation as the Orthodox canonically, because the Orthodox canonically are in a different situation than the society is. The society has less repair to do to fix their canonical situation than the Orthodox. The Orthodox have more to do there. What do you think of doing more live Q&A sessions? It's been some time since the last one. Well, I like doing the Q&A sessions, but what I've noticed is whenever I've done Q&A sessions lately, not many people are engaging them. So I thought, okay, well, this must not be something that people really want. If y'all want more Q&A sessions, please let me know and I'll do more. It just wasn't reflected in the numbers. It didn't seem like people were really interested in them. So I just thought, okay, well, I'll put something else out that's helpful to people that they might be more interested in. Okay, so Michael put himself in mortal sin for missing the greater than sign. Okay, well, let me go back and read it. Maybe I misread it. Let's see. Let me find it. I always have trouble too with the greater than and less than sign. Even though math was my best subject, I always had trouble with that. Where is it? I'm trying to find it so I could go back and read it. I mean, I stand corrected if I misread it, but I want to read it up properly so that I could properly respond to it. And okay, here it is. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems that you think. Okay, so y'all are. I always get tripped up with the. Yeah, so something else would be greater than. Okay, greater than you think greater than 50% of them. Okay, all right. Yeah, this is due to me and my deficiencies in the greater than sign. And please don't remind me of the crocodile with the open mouth trick on how to understand the greater than sign, because that's obviously didn't work for me. Okay, so y'all are saying that it reads, you think that greater than 50% of the Novus Ordo are done badly. Okay, yes, that is my position. But then your question is, I don't think swapping these priests to TLM. So you don't think swapping the Novus Ordo priests to the traditional Latin Mass would help them do their jobs properly? Why? It would certainly force them to, number one, in some cases where they think the church has erred in it, it would certainly work against that and thinking that the church erred in having this liturgy for so many years. And it would also help restore some more reverence. I don't understand why you think that wouldn't help. I think that would help. Some of the most balanced priests that I know are the ones who practice the ordinary form and extraordinary form. So maybe I'm still not understanding the question, though. I don't know. If I point out someone's sin of calumny, am I committing the sin of detraction? Not exactly. Detraction would be revealing a hidden fault. If this is a hidden sin of calumny, you wouldn't want to publicly expose that. But if a person has publicly engaged in calumny, to address that publicly with somebody else who needs to be aware of that is not the sin of detraction. No. Michael is under mathematical censure. So I thought that all right, so look, help me out here. All right. We're gonna go from reason and theology to math and theology. The greater than the mouth means where the mouth is facing means the thing over here next to the mouth is greater than the thing without the mouth. Right? That's the way I've understood it. Okay. So if the greater than sign is pointed towards this here, this is going to be greater than this. That's the way I've understood the greater than sign. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But even in light of that, I still don't understand the way it's written there. And again, I mean, math was my best subject. But I guess I don't have a passion to understand the greater than sign any better. Okay. Okay, looking here, Michael answers greater than 50% of questions correctly. That's funny. What's your favorite worship song that isn't chant? Yeah, I guess this wouldn't be chant. There is a Coptic. You can't call it a chant. It's not really a chant, but there's a Coptic song in English that I really like, where it has the refrain of "My Lord Jesus Christ, help me," which is something that is often used in the Coptic liturgies or in Coptic prayer. I remember the sound of it. I see the image of the video, but I'm drawing a blank on the name. I know if you just typed in Coptic song Jesus help me, it should come right up. If your position is that the Novus Ordo missal isn't inherently bad, I think it follows that a TLM missal wouldn't automatically fix things. We'd all agree the Novus Ordo mistakes aren't inherent. Make sure I'm following. If your position is that the Novus Ordo missal isn't inherently bad, and yeah, that's my position, although I do think that there are some things to the Novus Ordo missal officially promulgated that need to be reversed and reformed. So they might not be the most prudent or the most effective. I think it follows that a TLM missal wouldn't automatically fix things. Yeah, you're right. It wouldn't automatically fix those areas, but it would fix a whole lot of other things. And so that's why I'm still saying it needs to be done. But what we do need to do is have a reform to the Novus Ordo missal itself in the reverse direction. That would also help. Greater than 50% of all lies are false. Yeah, Lewis says, let's make it easy. 2 is greater than 1. Right, yeah. See, I get it whenever I see both signs there, because I know the mouth open means that's the thing that's greater, and the one with a closed mouth on the other side means that there's something lesser than. I understand that, but there was nothing on the other end of the mouth in that question. There was nothing there. Go back and look at his question. There was nothing on the other end of the chomper. So that's what was throwing me off. That's my excuse. Yeah, somebody else says, I think you're confusing ICKSP and John Cantius. I might be, which I believe are canons regular. Forgive me if you address this, but I'm behind. Yeah. Yeah, somebody else brought that up. That may be true. Either way, I still think that it would be a mistake to remove the Institute of Christ the King, because from what I've seen from them, they put out really good stuff. It would also be a mistake to do anything to the canons regular at St. John Cantius, which I have not heard any news on that. I'm just saying, I think that would be a mistake too. But yeah, I stand corrected if there's a distinction there. I remember, I could have sworn though that, I could have sworn that they were part of it, but that's just I'm sure, a misunderstanding on my part. Either way, John Cantius's liturgies were pretty awesome. But that would then explain why there was that part in the article that I was confused about celebrating the Novus Ordo liturgy once a month. That would then explain that. Jesus is greater than, right. Enslaved by truth. You remember the alligator thing? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. This is great. I hope this turns into one of those, the globe and the ladder, which I haven't heard a whole lot about, but that became a whole thing for a long time. I hope the greater than sign becomes one of those things of R&T. Any more Bible is the mark of the beast videos? No, I'm good. Did you see their response to me, by the way? It was pretty bad. I think I had to block them. Okay. Do you have an opinion on diachronic versus synchronic dispute when it comes to the magisterium? You'll have to excuse me if I don't understand your question properly. I'm aware of the difference between diachronic and synchronic approaches to historical theology, but I don't understand how that question relates to the magisterium. So you'll have to explain the distinction there on how that relates to the magisterium. Don't think of the greater than sign as a mouth, but as 2 pointers pointing towards something as they converge. Yeah, that doesn't help me. Our teacher said Pac-Man eats the bigger number. Okay, that helps me. But there wasn't another thing on the other end of Pac-Man in the question. That's my problem. Do any of the churches hold Latin and common language in one mass? All right. Do any of the churches hold Latin and common language in one mass? So you're asking me, are there any Roman Rite liturgies that uses both the vernacular and Latin? Yes. I've noticed some Orthodox in some areas do that. Yes. Some Orthodox, some Eastern Catholics. A lot of the Orthodox do in the vernacular entirely in some places, but then a lot of them do a lot in, older forms of the vernacular, which are no longer vernacular. And there's a mix. Is the alligator some kind of Common Core thing? Because I don't remember learning it. No, this was before Common Core. This was back when I was in high school. So I graduated 98. So it would have been somewhere between 94 and 98. Fun fact, I didn't go through grades 1 through 6. I didn't have them. Because of going back and forth to Israel and not caring about school and things like that, I missed the first 6 grades. So when I came back to the United States, I had to learn 6 grades in one summer to be ready for the 7th grade, which I did. But I didn't even know basic arithmetic. I didn't know basic multiplication and division, nothing. So I had to learn everything. I didn't even know that the letters T and H are pronounced the. I didn't even know that. I mean, I was that deficient in my education. So I had to learn everything in one summer, which again, I did. But I didn't really care about school at that time. So I just kind of made C's by not paying attention and not caring. Until my senior year of high school, I actually started taking it seriously because I had a friend who encouraged me to take it seriously. And I did. And I ended up making all A's that senior year. And then I stopped caring about college. So didn't care and then dropped out and ended up coming back to college many years later when I cared again and then made all A's. So whenever I care, I do well. But when I don't care, it's like, whatever. But no, this was before Common Core. This was, like I said, 94 to 98. I don't know when did Common Core come out. Okay. Can you give a primer on why universalism is wrong? I just, I did a whole video on this with Catholic Answers Focus recently. So go and watch that. It was earlier this month, the Catholic Answers Focus podcast. And I think it's called Will Hell Ever Be Empty? Something like that. So go and check that out there. I think that'll answer your question. All right. More greater than signs here. Yeah, so it's not being used mathematically, it's being used grammatically. Right. So somebody asked about Comedy Hour being a patron-only show. Fine, y'all. That's it. I've heard your cries, and I will do a Comedy Hour today. How's that? We'll do that today. I think I got to get going here because I'm pretty sure I am very late for a show with Lewis here. So, Lewis, I apologize. I did not realize the time. We'll go ahead and do our show together, and then I will do a Comedy Hour here in a little bit for y'all on Patreon. So y'all look for that. Patreon or channel members here. Let's see. Make sure I didn't miss any super chats. Yeah, Hebrew time. Indeed. We're going to go ahead and knock that out. I apologize, Lewis. I honestly did not realize the time. It felt like less than an hour for me. But I'm looking at the screen and it says 2 hours and 15 minutes. So, yeah. Sorry about that. All right. Y'all look forward to some Comedy Hours. Go ahead and send me some potential videos to review for Comedy Hour either on Patreon or email them to me if you're a channel member. Make sure to send it to reasonandtheology@gmail.com and let me know that you're a channel member. And don't send anything that is, tasteless. Please send me something with no profanity and is tasteful. And I'll go ahead and knock that one out. All right, that's going to do it. And we'll see y'all later. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this on your social media. See you later. God bless. Oh, wait, before you go, I would really appreciate it if you would consider supporting this channel. This is my primary means to provide for my family, and it also helps me to produce content like this video. If you would like to support me, become a patron by visiting patreon.com/Reason and Theology. You'll also get access to extra exclusive content when you become a patron. Lastly, hit that like button and the subscribe button, and be sure to leave a comment down below. God bless.